So when the cast comes out of the mold, unless the cast is perfect, it's time to repair the seam and other areas that need some touching up. The cast rarely comes out perfect, and even a perfect casting will probably require some work to fix it up. On this cast I had a pretty okay seam, except for a step in the leg and on the chest. This happens because the two halves of the mold are slightly offset from each other, and that could be because I didn't fit them together well enough, or it could be the way the mold is cut open. It's hard to say, but it's there, so it needs to be fixed before the cast can be painted. This is delicate work, and I use a couple of tools to get the job done. A knife, a scraping tool for plaster, and sandpaper. The scraping tool is a really nice handmade Italian plaster tool that my teacher Robert Bodum told me about. And I think I bought it to work on wax cast, but I never really liked how it felt on the wax. So I just use it on Aqua-Resin now. I think it's handmade in Pietrasanta, which is a marble carving town on the west coast of Italy, about an hour or two with the train from Florence. Sometimes you get a bubble in the sharp transitions, and when that happens, I use a knife to pop those out. Just kind of work into the transition. I use the knife to scrape at the seam and take it down. Then I take it further down with the scraper tool. And when there's a step, I try to take the higher part of the step down as much as possible, and then I soften the edge with a scraping tool. Then I'll fill what's left of the gap with Aqua-Resin and sand over that to make it a smooth transition. Because I'm stupid, I forgot to fill a gap in the silicone where the plumber's piping was coming out of the sculpture. Of course it's underneath the butt, so it's a hard to reach area, which is nice because it's also a hard to see area. But it doesn't look so nice. It looks like a pipe is coming out of the sculpture's bum, which is not ideal. So I used a jeweler's saw to cut most of it out. Then I went at it with a Dremel tool and ground out the remainder of the pipe. If I was in a studio where it would be okay to create a lot of dust, I would have done a lot more of the work with the Dremel. This messed up the cast a bit, but it's underneath so it's hard to see, and I'll sand it down and I'll fix it up with some Aqua-Resin later on. Then comes the time to repair the seam. I use a metal spatula that I have and add a small amount of Aqua-Resin. I try not to add any more than I need, as this just means I have to sand it down again. So I add a bit and then I'll use the tool to scrape it down. Once it's dried a bit, I use a wet brush to smooth it out. The resin I use for this is pretty thick. It's like a thick paste mixture, so it's not going to run anywhere, and I don't have to spend time chasing it, making sure it doesn't run out of the areas that I fill. Aqua-Resin works really well for this, as it doesn't dry out super fast once it hits the surface like plaster would, and there's no need to soak or water the cast before adding more material to it. Thinking about it though, it might help to water the cast a bit, but I'm not sure and it's not really necessary. Once the whole seam is patched, I let it dry out for a few hours and then I'll wet sand it again to get it down to a smooth surface. To keep the dust down, I wet sand, which helps when you share a studio and don't want dust everywhere. Somehow it also feels less abrasive, which I think is nice. I use different grits of sandpaper, but I can't remember what numbers they were. Maybe 180 and 220, I can't remember. Seaming can be tricky as my sculpture isn't smooth. It has a texture that I like and I want to keep that texture. And the seam can often end up looking smoother than the rest of the cast. I haven't really perfected my technique here, so the seam isn't perfect, but the paint job hides some of the crimes. Maybe Bondo would be a better option to fix the seam with than Aqua-Resin or some other material that is easy to sculpt. Thank you for watching. Hit the like and subscribe buttons if you want to see more, and I'll see you in the next one.